In this video, I speak with Sian Carry about how you can effectively lead a video team so that you can produce engaging video content that drives sales and builds your brand in the long run. Sian is an independent producer who works with award-winning film production companies such as Oxygen Films and Galactic Goldfish. As I'm sure you're aware, the popularity of online video content is increasing year by year. According to Cisco in 2021, 82% of all consumer web traffic will be video. Due to the resourcefulness that's required of independent film projects, I think Sian is a great person for marketing managers and small business owners to listen to. So keep watching if you want to give your organisation the best chance to succeed in 2021. So from your experience, what would you say the top 5 elements of leading a video crew are for marketing managers and small business owners?
Oh, okay. So I think the top 5 elements, element number 1, and this is the absolute crux of everything that you do, it's having empathy for your team. I am a very empathetic producer. I think that you cannot lead a team without empathy, because the problem is, if somebody has an issue, you want to make sure that you're approachable as a leader, because if you're not, it's unlikely that they're going to highlight that issue to you. And if they don't highlight the issue, then you're not aware of the issue. So being approachable and empathetic is one of the leading things to do when looking at managing a video team, because without it, you won't be able to anticipate any problems, and half of your job is anticipating those problems and making sure that they don't feed in to become issues or ongoing issues. Number 2, it's making sure that you prefer to have difficult conversations, because we're living in a very strange time, and the coronavirus pandemic has meant that we have a very different workflow now. And that obviously means that we have to consider outside influences on managing a video team, not least of all health and safety. And because of that, it means you might not always be able to work with the people that you want to work with. Potentially, you have to limit the numbers that are on your team. So you have to be very specific about what your project needs and what you require. So due to that, it is about having those difficult conversations and making sure that you pick the right people and that the people are happy with the implementations that you've put in place to protect them. And on top of that, making sure you're prepared to deal with any issues that do come up, which again feeds into being empathetic. But half of your job is putting out fires, and that means that you have to be prepared to deal with difficult conversations. Having said this does lead me on to point number 3, which is taking responsibility for your project. If something goes wrong, and if you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, maybe somebody is not acting in the way that you were expecting them to, or perhaps somebody is not really fully understanding their workflow, that means that you need to sit down and have a chat with them. And the onus is on you, because you've not communicated your expectations clearly. So the big thing is making sure that you know that the buck stops with you as a video production manager. And that means that you need to understand what the requirements are of your crew. You need to communicate them effectively. And if you're not doing that, then you need to reflect back, look inwards, and find out a way that you can make that work. Because realistically, everything that comes up on that screen is going through you. You have that responsibility. This brings me on to number 4, which is pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway: communication. Communication is the absolute pivotal thing that you need to make a set, a team, or anything else run smoothly. You need to make sure that everybody is on the same page. In fact, a lot of people consider producing as the role of making sure that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, and I think that that's incredibly important. You need to make sure that everybody's working together in a cohesive manner. And that means making sure there's clear communication throughout your project.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video so far. But before we go to number 5, I'd just like to say that the rest of this interview I found really interesting and engaging, so I hope you stay to watch the rest of the video. We even go and talk about Sian's recent purchases and how she's been influenced to make those decisions. And we also talk about identity and how that correlates with brands and purchasing products.
And then number 5 is making sure that you're giving 110% in whatever role you're doing. I mean, as I say, I usually come from a production perspective. However, no matter what role you take on your video production team, you need to make sure that you are doing your absolute best. If you're not doing your best, you need to question why that's the case. Maybe it's because you don't feel like you've been communicated with effectively. And if that's the case, you need to raise it, because people are there to listen. And it is only through having these conversations and understanding each other that you're going to make sure that your team is working effectively. So you've got to look at things from a very holistic perspective, and you've got to treat every single element as important, no matter if the person's acting as an assistant on the set or if the person's the director. Regardless, it's about making sure that everybody feels appreciated, wanted, and everybody is working towards the same goal to create this amazing project, looking at each different sector-specific thing and making sure all their jobs are done correctly.
Thanks for that. I think that last point as well about giving it 110% as well. It's about your effort to the bigger picture. And with people like marketing managers, they're playing a role which sometimes will seem like it's bigger than the other roles because it's a management type of role, but then it's still one role in that whole, result. I
completely agree. Yeah, leave your ego at the door. I don't think the ego has a place with whether you're marketing manager or anybody else. Leave your ego at the door. It's about making a team work as a unit. So if you're there thinking that you don't have to be there or that you're better than everybody else on set, it's not going to be good, because people aren't going to feel appreciated, and it kind of comes back to motivating people as well, because people aren't going to want to work for you if you present yourself as this person who everybody needs to please, because people should want to please you and want to be doing a good job, but they're not going to do that if you don't, speak to them nicely or treat them with respect. So absolutely, respect is so important. No matter if you are a producer, a director, or you're literally running around making teas and coffees, you have a right to feel respected at work and to feel valued. And good marketing managers will make sure that every single person on the team feels valued, no matter what their position is.
So when it comes to like small business owners as well, that maybe they don't have a marketing manager that's working with them because they're just doing things with the low budget costs and stuff, but they do have a video team, how would you say they should communicate with that video team?
I think it depends whether the video team's outsourced or not. If the video team is somebody that's like part of the company, then I'm sure that they'll have very clear expectations on what the company's sort of brand is and how to market that appropriately. If it's been outsourced and it's working with a video team that isn't usually like a permanent fixture within the company, I think at that point it's very important to sort of communicate your expectations clearly. I know that I've been saying that a lot, but it really is the crux of everything. If you do want to increase brand awareness, that's great, but you need to tell that video production company how you want that to be the case. Is it a case of displaying the brand logo in the video? Is it a case of product placement with things that you sell within the video? Perhaps you want the brand to be audibly said within that video. If you don't communicate that, then you're not going to get the best results. So it is just about being open, honest. If you can be specific, do. Because specificity is everything, especially when working with a company that you don't usually work with, and that's what's going to get you the best results. And obviously on top of that, it's about making sure that you do have that sort of section where you see the video and you can feedback on it and implement any changes. If it comes back and it's not what you expect, you need to say why it's not what you've expected, not just, oh, it doesn't market the brand very well. Why doesn't it? What is it about it that you're feeling hesitant about? I think that being very specific is really the way to go forward when looking at that.
Yeah, it's like the communication is really the thing that I think is being the most important thing that you've covered today. Back and forth about being clear with your expectations, being clear with what results you want to get out of it, but also being clear about how specific you need to be in order to what's the strategy of how we're going to get those results. And I think for small business owners, you probably do already know a certain degree about marketing, but I think it's really important to learn as much as you can and have an overall picture of it, so then you could know what you're looking for in a market manager, or you're looking for in a video team to be able to get those results, and then you'll be able to understand how to clearly communicate better as well as you go along, I think, as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, the one big thing is doing your research and making sure that the person that you're working with or the person that you've outsourced is going to deliver what you want them to deliver. And that might mean having to trawl through websites, having to look at a few different sort of show reels for people that work on camera, etc. But making sure that you've got the right person for the job is half of the hard work. So absolutely, the big thing is if you want to sort of finesse what your marketing strategy is, make sure you're hiring the right people. And that, again, the book stops with you. Do your research and look into it. And honestly, you will see the results tenfold.
So in terms of somebody that's just getting into marketing right now, that's maybe a marketing coordinator, or they could be a marketing manager, but early on in their career, what do you think's something that they really need to know about maybe being resourceful in that environment where they may not have a big budget?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's certainly something that I can, relate to with my experience in independent film, especially because quite often I've worked with low budgets. Being resourceful, I don't think there's a really cut and dry way of saying how to be resourceful, but I think that the main thing is being prepared to wear lots of different hats. Sometimes it just involves some door knocking. It involves being cheeky. It involves reaching out to people and maybe not necessarily offering money, but something else, like if you could provide a service for your business, maybe it's a case of providing that service in exchange for another service, which I think is also a very, very good way of making contacts and networking. Because ultimately, in an ideal world, you'll have a big budget and you'll be able to market your brand however you want to do it. But I recognise that isn't something that everybody always has access to. And from my perspective, there's been stories that I really want to tell, but due to the content, maybe it's quite heavily controversial. It's not being picked up for funding. And still the point of that is finding a way to tell that story on a low budget. So for me, I think that it is just beg, steal, borrow, maybe not steal, scratch that one off actually, but just beg and borrow, maybe steal, I don't know. And just find really creative ways of thinking. I think that it really helps if you are a creative thinker, if you can think outside the box, think laterally. You know what, just try and do some puzzles in your spare time, do the crossword, because it'll just get that brain ticking over and finding ways that you can sort of get around any barriers that you come into.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting to look at video as well in that way of going out and doing other things that aren't anything to do with video, but then they could inspire you to come up with new ideas for a video in the future, like you say, knocking on doors and having conversations and doing research about the consumer that you're serving.
Believe me, this is something that they do on larger scales as well. I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen the Inside Misguided documentary, but 3 of their workers were sent to Ibiza literally to scout costumes, and they were having a drink on an evening, it has to be said, but they were preliminary. Their job there was to sort of scout what people were wearing, what the summer brands were, how they could replicate more expensive designer styles for a way that was going to be cheap for their consumers and their audiences. So this is something that's implemented at quite large budgeted businesses as well. So if you are working on a small budget, then you know what, take a leaf out of their book, go on that spa day, take that trip on the train. It is really important to stay creative, and a creative mindset is something that will really help you. I mean, absolutely, think about strategy, think about, the rising levels of who you're hitting in terms of audience engagement. That's absolutely fine. But a creative mind is something that's really going to support you in that process and in that journey of creating a brand, because people are more engaged with things that they can see on a creative level. I mean, what do people do in their spare time? I mean, they don't do spreadsheets. I mean, if they're me, they do, but other than that, they sit down and they watch Netflix, or they go on trips to the park. These are all creative activities, recreation. And the best brands are the ones that connote the fact that you can't live without them. I mean, if you are a creative person like me, I am absolutely overcome with Apple products at the minute, and believe me, I despise it because I know how much they monopolize. But equally, they've made it seem to me through their marketing that as a creative, this is the brand to have. This is the brand that gets me the best editing resources. This is the brand that lets me communicate with all my contacts effectively. So I think it's about tapping into what your audience wants. But equally, if your audience does spend half of their time in terms of their recreational perspective and consuming art and consuming like creative endeavors, then that's something that you should be utilizing. Make sure that whatever you are doing with your brand is being conveyed in a creative way, because realistically, people don't look at numbers, they look at visuals and they look at audio. So play on that and make sure that people really do engage with your brand.
So through your filmmaking journey, could you just tell us one thing that you've learned about marketing?
Yeah, sure. I think that the big thing is to be yourself. I mean, as a producer, the biggest thing that I am marketing is me. As a sole trader, as an independent, I want people to work with me again. And I think that when I first started that journey, I was very aware of the fact that I was coming in from a position of responsibility as a woman, and that immediately that put me on the back foot. And it made me feel as though I couldn't make a step wrong. So I was kind of giving off this vibe of being very professional, to the point where I wasn't approachable, to the point where it was clear that all I cared about was the schedule or the numbers, etc. Which really, as I've learned through my journey, isn't what producing is about, because the best way to lead is through being approachable and listening. So I think that that's one thing that I've learned on my journey. And I think that as I've gone forward and as I've developed as an individual, developing my own brand, or my own, how people perceive me and how people want to work with me, the one thing that I've learned is being myself has got me more work, because people want to work with me again because they admire my sense of humour, or they admire my approach, or just general personality. I think that it's about letting your personality shine through and not limiting yourself. Don't try to be somebody that you're not to fit in with other brands on the market, because even if you're not right for one particular audience, there will be a very specific audience that just think that you fit in perfectly, and that is the audience that you want to be targeting.
Yeah, and I think as well in marketing, just in general, with any brand, if you can be distinctive and show your personality in a way that's obvious it's you, someone can watch an advert and be like, oh, that's obviously Lloyd's because they've got a black horse, or there's these distinctive brand assets that they've got that show their personality or show the vibe of that brand. The more you can do that, the better. And instead of just trying to pretend to be everybody else and blend into that, the noise, that's what marketing's all about, standing out, and that's what branding's all about. So if you can be more yourself with a personal brand, and almost in a comical way sometimes, if you want to make fun of yourself a little bit and own those sides of yourself, whether you're a company or a personal brand, that's going to be a benefit in that, because people will remember, oh, it's the guy with glasses, or it's the guy with a ponytail, whatever it is that they remember me. It's great,
I think that a really good case study in this is Lewis Capaldi, because I absolutely despise crooning music. Like, believe me, give me rock and roll any day of the week. Lewis Capaldi is not my style or brand of music whatsoever. But the reason that I've gone out and purchased his albums and stuff is because I love his personality, because he's never limited himself. He's always been very obvious. He's hilarious on social media, and he gives off this really approachable, you could go to the pub and have a pint with him vibe. So even though it's not my style of music, I've still invested in his brand, because I really like how he presents himself. So again, being individual, being unique, and being yourself, absolutely perfect. That's what you want in your brand. Make your brand reflect you.
Yeah, I love that as well. And it reminds me of me. Like, I got into Sam Smith like about a year ago or something, and I never thought I would get into him. But the thing that appealed to me with Sam Smith was his vulnerability, authenticity, and rawness, and the energy of the emotion that he gets across, like a powerful film would. His music to me sounds cinematic, because it's so immersive, I think is the word for it. And because of that, that's what immersed me in his music, even though I don't really like the production of it, music that much. But because the energy was there and the rawness and the emotion, that's what brought me to it. So if there's something there that's a key selling point like that, for example, and then I'll be like rationally thinking, why am I listening to this? Like, wow, this is weird. I've got to change my identity to some extent to allow this into my life,
Like, we're going to just look at me now and my recent purchases, which have been an absolute nightmare. But I found a brand recently that I'd never heard of before whatsoever. And how was it translated to me? Through a sponsored Facebook post. And sometimes it's literally just a case of getting the metrics up, saying, I want this post to target young women between this age category that have shown interest in these different things. The chances are you're going to show your brand to somebody who you want to reach, who hasn't actually been able to find your brand before now, which is what happened to me with this site. And before I knew it, I'd spent £160 on 2 designer bags and a purse. And that was because I got a very good discount on it as well. So always make sure that you're giving your customers a good deal. But yeah, I felt as a consumer that I was getting a good deal, that this brand was absolutely a part of my personality, that I had to have this bag, I had to own it because it was so beautiful and it was amazingly quirky, and it was an extension of my personality. And by the way, that brand was Vendula London, if you do want to have a look at it. And as much as I hate looking inward on myself, I have to say I know it works. So yeah, please look at targeted marketing, because I can guarantee you will get people interested in your brand. Because I think that if you can, reflect in on yourself, because the one person that knows what you like more than anything else is you. So if you're questioning, why is it that I'm drawn to this particular thing, then I think that's a really great case study in how you can market your brand better. For example, if you find yourself drawn to a particular brand, but you're not entirely sure why, ask yourself those questions. Ask why it is that you feel compelled to that person or that product or, that company. Because if you start looking at it, you'll start finding the answer. Maybe it's the colour, maybe it's the way that person presents, etc. But all these different things feed into how you can put that strategy in place for your business.
That's so true. If you can observe human behaviour in yourself, it's such an advantage. Some people don't always stop to look at what they're doing and why they're doing it and question themselves. Why was I influenced to make that decision to purchase that product? Look, because if you're a marketer, you need to understand those things, and you're the best person to sort of learn from in a way. I think that's a good place to end on. Thanks a lot for coming on.
No worries.
So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And just to recap on those 5 points that we made at the beginning. Number 1 was to have empathy for your team. Number 2 was to be prepared for having those difficult conversations. Number 3 was to take full responsibility for your projects. And number 4 was to communicate clearly with everybody on your team. And finally, number 5, give 110% to your role. And I think that's the greatest point to make, really, out of those 5. And it's a good way to round it all up, I would say. So please do subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. And also leave your comments and feedback down below. We'd love to hear what your plan is going forwards now and what you're going to do with this information. Thanks for watching, everybody.